First of all, we are going to be starting today perek test, the 9th chapter in Sefer Yehoshua. The topic is dishonest enemies in an ethical nation. There are so many important lessons that are to be learned about today's geopolitical landscape, which we're going to be addressing just through this through our perek. Obviously, it's very, very relevant to everything we have to deal with. A special thank you to Aliza Hoffman for sponsoring today's shir. And it is a pleasure to be learning and studying and sharing Torah. Thank you. Thank you for the kindness of making this opportunity. I would also say a special mazel tov to Adrian and Deborah on the birth of a granddaughter. Be'ezrat Hashem, tremendous nachas. Be'ezrat Hashem continued. So let's jump straight in and let's learn a little bit of Torah together. So we start off our perek and let's just lay the land for ourselves right now. We know that at this point in time, the nation of Israel has had two victorious successes. These unbelievable successes. There's been the victory in Jericho, in Yericho, and there's been a second victory, although not the first time round, but the second time was an astounding victory in the place called Ai. Right? Ai was leveled to the ground, 12,000 people eradicated, and there's nothing left of it. And today you can go visit its ruins. And that's it. So that's a starting point to which we get a sense that the omniscient narrator, right? So the voice in Tanakh, it's important just to appreciate the voices. The voice that's describing Tanakh, which in this case is the author of Sefer Yehoshua, tells us what everybody else is feeling. So here we go. We actually hear the beginning. This is an important passage to be aware of. Vayikishmoa kol melachim asher be'evar Yarden bahar v'ashvela v'chol chof hayom hagadol el mul halavonon achiti v'moria knania prizia cheviv v'yivusi. When all the inhabitants, including all these Canaanite folks, hear what has just happened, vayiskabtzu yachdav v'yalachem im Yoshua im Yisrael pe'echad. They all gathered together as an entente. They join as a military together to stop this together. Because remember, the way it worked in those days, and we're going to see this specifically as we move to the later chapters, is that really it isn't the Canaanite kingdom. It's more like really feudal systems, right? So you have a king of a city and the neighboring cities, and there's a little tribal group there, and there's another tribal group there. And they realize that if they're going to wait for each tribe to fight alone, they're going to be annihilated, like Jericho and like Ai was in their surroundings. So they say, you know what, we need to do something else. We need to form together an alliance, and we're going to see that battle. That's an amazing battle, which will take place next week. Okay, so next week is going to be is perek Yud. What was this unbelievable alliance and battle, the Valley of Ayalon? A lot of unbelievable stuff to be occurring next week. But right now, before that happens, there's one group of people who are probably at this board meeting of all the local kings who disagrees. And they are the people of Gibeon, of Givon. What happens is they formulate a different policy when it comes to the trouble of the Hebrews who are coming in. So here we have it. So Givon hears about this. And they also do in trickery. So they put on old clothes and they take gourds of wine which are dried up and broken, and they act as if they're coming from very far away, and they come and they with broken shoes and dust on their legs, and they come to the nation of Israel and they say, we came from very far away. Some of the Forshim say we came from Africa, they Trans-Asia, right? We're coming in and we heard about the incredible miracles that have occurred for you. We want to make peace with you. So they're pretending to be local. They're not one of the nations. We want to make a covenant with you. And the nation of Israel is a savvy nation, so they ask them in this pasuk Zayin, Vayomer Isha Yisrael El Achivi. The Israeli are Chivites because they're from Givon. Ulai bekir bi'ata Yoshe ve'eich echros elachabris. Maybe you're just our neighbors, so we can't really cut a covenant with you. And they say, no, but look at our travel stuff. Look at our bread; it's all dry. Look at our empty gourds of water. We came and it describes they eat with them and they believe them. They take it in hook, line, and sinker. In pasuk Gedad and Tesvav, Vayas lahem Yehoshua shalom. Yehoshua makes peace with these people. Vayikros lahem bris lachayosam, and they make a covenant to keep them alive. Vayishbeu lahem nisiyei ha'edah, and the princes or the ministers make a covenant with, they make a shavua, an oath with them as well. Turns out 3 days later they realize that, hey, they actually are our neighbors, right? They are one of these Canaanite nations. What do we do now? So now they're stuck, and there becomes an internal argument, because on the one hand they swore to them, but if you look at Pasuk Yod Ches, they did not destroy them at the moment, because they'd sworn. God of Israel, and the people started complaining to the ministers, like, how did you cut this peace deal? This isn't appropriate. And so the matter rises up the ranks, it goes to Yehoshua, and Yehoshua is charged with this very complex issue. Do you respect the covenant you made, or do you not respect it? And at the end of the day, Yehoshua says, because you tricked us, you're going to be cursed, but we're not going to kill you. Instead, if you look at the second last passage in the perek Chavav, so Yehoshua saves them from the masses of Israelites who want to kill these people. And he makes them, a service class to the nation of Israel. They're going to be water carriers and wood hewers. So they become a subservient class in Israel. This is the story of the Gibeonites. It's an unusual story because it's not a story of a war. The chapters beforehand are wars, and the chapters that are going to be afterwards are going to be wars and division. This is a chapter of peace, albeit a strange peace. So a few just basic things to figure out. First of all, where in the world is Gibeon? So you can visit it today. So the easiest way to do it is if you go to what's called the grave of Shmuel Hanavi, Nebi Samuel. It's a national park. We made the mistake of when I went there, because I was there in January with my son, Shmuel, because we finished learning the Sefer Shmuel, so we went to all the places in Sefer Shmuel. So one of the places we went to was, the Shmuel is just don't get off at the bottom and walk up the hill. It's a very steep hill to get up to Nebi Samuel. But it is just north of Jerusalem, and it's its own national park, very beautiful place. It really isn't actually the kever of Shmuel Hanavi. I'm sorry to burst anybody's bubbles. There's a crusader fort there. There's of course a mosque, because the Arabs take over everything everybody else did. But really actually it's probably more likely to be a place called Mitzpah, which we will encounter a number of times, which is very significant in Tanakh. So it's significant in another way, much perhaps more significant than Ramah, which is where Shmuel's buried. So we'll get to that. It clearly isn't Ramah itself. Okay, so but just to understand that in the map, so if you're looking, it's actually a little lower to where they are. So they're in Ha'ai. It's really just to the north of Yerushalayim. It's going to the Givat Zev area. Piskat Zev area. So it's not so far away. In fact, I put it onto Google Maps, and it takes about an hour and 10 minutes to drive from Tel Ai, which is where we are, to that. Now, it happens to be that it is difficult because you have to go through Ramallah, and if you're a Jew, you'll be killed just going there. But then, again, Islam wasn't invented for another 2,000 years, so it was all right to go through Ramallah in those days. So it's a bit, either way, whichever way you do it, it's over a lot of mountains, so it's a very difficult terrain, and they didn't have any cars in those days, so you can imagine, for all intents and purposes, they have no reason to believe that the folks that are actually pretty much locals to where they are, where Givon is. It sounds like Givon is a big village. You can actually see. I just put a picture of it in the our notes over here, where you can see what the outlook is. It's actually a large mountain. Today, there is on the left side of it, you'll see the buildings of it. I'm sorry, it's not such a huge picture. On the left side, which is a more recent Arab village called Algier or something to that effect, which is on the left side of it. But it's really the mountaintop is where Givon was. It was a very large and prosperous city. We'll see how important Givon is next week in the response of the other Canaanite nations to this peace accord, because they're not so happy about this, and clearly Givon wasn't an insignificant city. But nonetheless, you can see it today. So it's really just to the northern reaches of Jerusalem, and it does play a very significant role in later Tanakh. We're going to see many things that will happen in Givon later on. In Tanakh, there's the well of Givon. There's going to be a fight, a scuffle between the soldiers of David and Shaul later on. There's a lot of things that happen at Givon. But nonetheless, for our point right now, it's a Chivite city, which is one of the 7 nations that are trying to make peace. For me, this is very just complicated to understand what everybody's thinking. So what I want to do today is to break down the thought process of every side. Okay? So the starting point is why would the Givonites, why would this Hittite nation decide they want to make the subterfuge to bid for peace? So that's just the starting question. So in order to answer that, we need to understand what is the Torah's protocol for dealing with nations? What is the Torah's protocol for dealing with enemy territory in the land of Israel? And we have that very clearly because it's written in Parashas Shoftim. The Torah tells us explicitly what to do when we come upon enemies in the land of Israel. So I want to read these psukim with you, and then I want to ask you what you think it actually means, because there's a little bit of an ambiguity when it comes to this. So here's how it goes. In Devarim perek Chaf, we have the description which is given to us of how to deal with the nations that we fight against. So here we go. It says, Ki sikravel ir on page 3, lilachem alea v'karasa alea l'shalom. If you come to fight a city, you must bid for peace. You must ask for peace first. V'haya im shalom ta'anecha v'fascha loy, lach v'haya l'kol ha'am nimtza ba yulecha l'mas v'avaducha. If they accept the terms of peace, then they will pay you taxes and they will serve you. I mean, they're going to be a subservient citizenry to you, right? It's important to think about this for a moment. Is again, how does Judaism deal with others when on the ascendant, right? Meaning it's an important point because there was 1,000 years of this during Jewish history. How do we deal with others, right? It's a question which is still troubling us today. How do you have a state which is Jewish but maintains a Jewish majority? Do you incorporate the others? What level of voting do they have? What level of representation do they have? You know, these are complicated questions. The Torah says you will make peace with them, but on your terms, and they will now pay you taxes and be a subservient class. So let's say, no, we're not interested in making peace. They therefore respond with war rather than peace. But you may besiege such a city. Then you will kill all the soldiers. All males who are operating in this, as soldiers will be killed. You're not allowed to kill the women and the children. You may despoil the city, but you can only kill the men who are fighting. And you may take the spoils of such a city. That's what you can do with all the further distant cities outside the land of Canaan. When it comes to the nations in the land of what's going to be Israel, then you're not allowed to let anybody live. You're supposed to eradicate every single living soul of those nations. So let's. But before we even get to the Givonim, let's just understand what the Psukim mean for a second. It sounds like, from a simple read of the Psukim, that there's a differentiation made between the nations outside of the land of Israel. So, as an example, when David HaMelech is making a conquest, as an example of Damascus, right, versus when they're attacking, let's say, the Jebusite city called Jerusalem, which they're going to conquer in parts over the course of the next little while. So there's going to be a difference. When it comes to a city in Canaan, no quarter given, already killed. When it comes to outside bidding for peace, the question that becomes is not so obvious is, do you still bid for peace when it comes to the Canaanite nations? Right? Meaning, how do you read these psukim? Do you say like this? The starting point of asking for peace, is that the universal rule, right? And then there's the tree diagram splits. If they say no, when it comes to the nations of outside of Israel, you kill the soldiers and let everybody else live. I mean, in Israel, you kill everybody. Or is it no? The way you read it is there's the unit dealing with outside of Israel, what's called Milchemes Rishus, a optional war, and that is peace option. When it comes to in the land of Israel, that isn't even an option. You just plow through. You bulldoze all the way through. That happens to be a debate as to how to read the psukim. Do you understand why it's confusing? Because the psukim have a little bit of an ambiguity as to how to read this, which has very big ramifications for our specific story. So let me just line up the perspectives. Rashi, as an example, takes for granted that you only ask for peace when it comes to outside of Canaan territory. Inside of Israel, you do not have the responsibility, you do not have the obligation. You may, but you do not have the responsibility of asking for peace first. That's the way Rashi understands it. This is the way the Ravad understands this on the Rambam. The Rabban and the Rambam passing this as an halacha, because remember, most halacha svarim do not deal with these issues, because most halacha svarim were written about issues that pertain to the Jewish community in the diaspora. The Shulchan Aruch is classic as an example. But what about wars? Right? The Shulchan Aruch doesn't talk about wars, because the Shulchan Aruch is written in the 1500s when Jews were not fighting wars. At best, they were defending themselves. So where do we look for this? The Rambam wrote about all halacha, and he wrote a book called Melachim, called Kings, and Milchamos, and Wars, and in the 6th chapter he talks about this, and he says very clearly, there's always peace. You will always ask for peace first. If peace is not given, then it depends on who you're fighting. If it's a Canaanite nation, absolute annihilation. If it's a non-Canaanite nation, then quarter is given to the women and children, but the men are wiped out. That's the difference between the two, and that's the way it's seen. Let's just transpose this to us for a second. Which nation do the Givonites belong to? Givon is the name of the city, not the name of the nation. They are the Chivi. They are the Chivites, right? So they are one of the 7 nations, card-carrying members of the 7 nations of Israel. They are a Canaanite nation. They are not Semitic, okay, right? Just to clarify, right? The Canaanite nations are from the Cham side of the family, right? So these are the real McCoy who fall party to this. So if we read it that the way that perhaps Rashi reads it, that there's no peace which is given to such people or offered to such people, you can understand why they were rather scared and made this subterfuge, right? To try to achieve this, to save themselves. This was, they realized that if they didn't do this, the next morning they would be fried, right? So this is the way that it's understood. However, if you understand like the Ramban and the Rambam, who go through this very explicitly, that everybody is offered peace, and then the question just is, do you accept the peace or not? Then you have to ask yourselves, so what was the issue here? Meaning, just wait for them to come to you. They'll send that you'll fly the white sheet, and they'll come in, they'll make terms, and you'll get to the same result without having to go through all of this nonsense with risk of death. Because once you start cheating people, they don't like that so much. So why are they getting so excited about this? So the Mefarshim explain this. The Malim says, you know what it is? It's like this. They looked around and they said, we just based on the Canine Chronicle, right, that we've been reading, that Jericho was wiped out. Any survivors? No. Hai was wiped out. Any survivors? No. So they said, doesn't look so good, right? Just in terms of political trends, right? This does not look so good for us if we're going to be next on the list. It must be that their peace was not offered, which means, even though if we have experts in the Hebrew Bible, and the Hebrew Bible says peace should be offered, it doesn't look like these Hebrews were listening to their book, right? So they looked at this and they said that maybe these Hebrews are being a little too, forthright about their conquest, and we need to take things into our own hands. So that was their assumption. Now, the question is, were they right or not? Were they right or not? Were the Israelites, were the Hebrews, in fact, giving peace to Jericho? Were they giving peace to Ai? Did we see that? No, we did not see any bid, right? We did not see any messengers going in and saying, listen, folks, if you want to come out and, and disarm and the whole business, we'll make, that didn't happen. So it sounds like they're correct. However, there's a very... Was that so? There is a very interesting medrash, which is important to understand the general milieu of everything we're dealing with. The medrash says in Vayikra Rabbah, source 8. It's important to read inside because it has such important ramifications on the understanding the landscape. Amar Rabbi Yishmael ben Nachman, shalosh proz gema'os. That means a messenger. So he sent 3 ambassadors or messengers, Shalach Yehoshua Etzlam, to the nations of Canaan. And he said to them, those who decide they want to leave, good luck, goodbye and good luck. Lahashlim, yashlim. Anybody wants to make peace? With the greatest pleasure, speak to us about the terms. La'asos milchama, yes. Anybody wants to fight? We will see you next Tuesday. Right? So they made this was the messenger that was sent already. Girgoshi amad upana me'elav lefichach not eretz yafeh karatzai. We know that the Girgashi, which is one of the 7 nations, we never find them fighting. Israelites never fight the Girgashi, even though it's one of the 7 nations, which you mention all the time. That's because the Girgashi, which was one of the 7 nations, said, no, it's all right, and they went to Africa. They left. So one of the 7 nations actually was not part of the battle. But this is the terms, which means, so did Yehoshua individually send a message to Yericho, or didn't go city by city? They sent out ambassadors. When they were on the steppes of Moab, when they were on the plains of Moab, he sent these messengers, and he says there's going to be 3 options. You're going to make up your minds, and you're going to either fight, make peace, or leave. Those are the 3 options, which means that this option was given to them. It turns out, therefore, reading through this, it must mean that nobody was really interested in peace for whatever reason. It's belittling the leader. The leader is an autocrat and doesn't want to lose his station of power. Whether they thought they were more powerful, whatever the reason is. But this was a message which was broadcast and sent into all of the land of Canaan, and most people refused. Which means, did Israel do their due diligence? If you ask the Ramban, if you ask the Rambam to ask for peace, the answer is they did. They did it wholesale. They didn't do retail. So they didn't go city by city. They sent out a general message before they came into the land of Israel. Be aware, we're coming. Respond in like. The Girgashi got the message and left. Right? So everybody else did not. Which means that, and by the way, did any other nations make peace? Take a look at this. If we look at the end of 2 prokim from us where we are in Yehoshua, the Tanakh tells us explicitly, Lo yehosai ir asher ishlimo es bnei Yisrael bilti achchivi yoshvei givom es hakol lakhu b'milchama. No one made peace except for the Chivites. Right? Why? Because God actually influenced their decision making to make bad decisions to fight. Right? Why to fight Israel? To destroy them. It's better that they actually enter the war and get destroyed than for it to be more parav. So let's go back for a second. So when Yericho and Ha'ai were destroyed, were they offered peace? The answer is, in general, yes, they were. Not specifically, but in general, they were. The fact that they did not respond in like means to say they waived their opportunity. But when the people of Givon, the Chivites, now look in and see this, they misinterpret this. They misinterpret this because, of course, communication is not, we're not talking about the modern age of communication. They misinterpret this. They think they were not offered peace, and they say, therefore, it's up to us to figure out a plan, and they make this whole ruse in order to be able to achieve peace. That's the mechanics of the decision-making that's happening over here. Fascinating, right? Just to think about the different stages of saving their skins. If it's according to Rashi and the Rambam, where there's no peace offered to them, we understand exactly what they're doing. If peace is offered to everybody, it was they misunderstood that Jericho and Ai did not take advantage of that to exercise that option as well. Which leads us now to a few questions. Is okay, so why what excuse do they have? What moral excuse do they have? Now, you don't always have to ask moral questions to nations which aren't moral, but I would like to assume this. And one word in this perek which is extra, which is really speaks to this issue, and it says, "Vayasu gam hema ba'arma." They also did in trickery. The word "also" is a troubling word, because it seems to suggest that there were other people who were tricking, who were being deceitful beforehand. And so the question becomes who else acts with trickery? So Rashi already points us to, about Yaakov, right? So that's one option. But look at Rashi in source 10. Rashi says, yes, you're right. Thank you. It's not the Yaakov and Esau. The circle is coming full circle now. What happened is when Shimon and Levi came to the city of Shechem, and Shechem happens to be originally a Chivite city, they come and they say, listen, we're all right intermarrying. There's just one minor medical procedure, right, which the men need to undergo. They undergo it. 3 days later, they're all convalescing in bed, and the city's wiped out because of the rape of Dinah, right? So they say, listen, we have a little bit of, we'll call it, familial remembering over here, and this doesn't, we don't trust you guys. So we're going to do the same thing that you did to us. You think that truth is variable, so we're going to do the same thing. Gam kein ba'arma. What I think Rashi is telling us, and I just think this is important over here, is that the nation of Israel is always going to be held to the standard of those who make the mistakes. Like you think about it this, whenever anybody says today, the cycle of violence in Israel, they always say like this, the Palestinians, they may have done intifadas and killed thousands of people, but Baruch Goldstein, right? You see there's a cycle of violence, you Jews as well. That happens to be, I can't speak for, and were the weapons in the Marasana, but we don't know. And he was crazy, and he shouldn't have killed those people, but in the end of the day, that will remain, Dar Yassin, right? In the War of Independence, right? Meaning to say like this, when we do something which is untowards, even if it's an exception, even if it's an extremist, for the rest of all history, it'll always be Gam Haim Ba'arma. They'll say, you know what? It's your playbook. They will always do this. They will never allow us that to be seen as a tail of the bell curve. And an extremist, they will view that as it haunts us today. But that's exactly what I think Rashi is telling us over here, which repeats itself again in history. I remember when I watched, when I was in 2001, I watched a show on the TV called Special Assignment, and time I was trying to explain the Intifada. But of course, you can't explain the Intifada so well because so many Israelis are getting killed, civilians are getting killed. So you have to balance it. So the way they balanced it was they explained that there was, when Israel did targeted assassinations, with the helicopter, sometimes they got the wrong car. And there was this one time an Arab family was wiped out. And so you see, that's the cycle of violence. That was a mistaken collateral damage for trying to kill a terrorist, and those were actually people trying to murder men, women, and children. That doesn't really matter. But the point is that we will hold you to whatever mistakes you make, whether intentionally or not, and we're going to use as a license to act in such a way towards you. This is the story of Jewish history. It's here we have to appreciate that this is not a new thing as well. Now, let me ask you a question. So let's assume that they decide they need to hotwire this peace agreement because they feel like they're not going to get a chance, right? So what's so wrong with that? Doesn't it end up at the same result? Meaning like this: if the nations of Israel really were supposed to make peace, right? And like the Ramban and the Rambam suggest, which is the predominant view, then really they should have achieved the same thing, meaning they just made peace, right? So what's wrong with this whole arrangement, right?
The leadership? Who speaks on behalf of the Chivi and the Gassi, etc.? They were like a small subsect, perhaps.
No, there's no speaker. This is not a nation state. These are city states.
Okay, so still, who's the leader, right?
No, it doesn't matter. It's city by city. The war is going to be city by city. The peace is going to be city by city. I'm just wondering, why is it that the peace that they arranged is anything different than the peace that the Torah asks us to bid for? Meaning they got to the same result even though they used deception. So why is that so wrong? The answer is because the Torah tells us in perek Zayin and Dvarim, the Torah says, "Ki v'yachash v'lakecha la'aretz asher ata b'Hasham al-rishta v'nashal goyim rabim mipanecha." Hashem's going to, when you come to the land, Hashem's going to remove the nations from you. But listen to this: in the second pasuk, "Nosanam Hashem lekach l'fanecha v'kislam hacharem tacharimeim osam loy sichros lahem bris." You're not allowed to make a covenant with them. So the Torah tells us you must offer peace, but you're not allowed to make a covenant. So what's the difference between a peace and a covenant then? And so the Radak explains, the Malbim explains as well, that the difference is the terms of the agreement. The peace that we offer them is contingent upon a few things. Number one is high taxes, because they're local, they're now constituents of the country. But number two is monotheism. Monotheism, which means you need to now release, you need to move away from your pagan worship and accept the God of Israel. You don't have to be Jewish. This is unlike any of the other self-defensive religions like Christianity and Islam that need to make the rest of the world their religion. Judaism never argued that because Judaism wasn't trying to invent itself. So therefore, when it comes to Judaism, you need to accept the God of Israel, but you're going to remain as what's called a ger toshav. There's a construction of such a thing. If you read David Friedman's book, One Israel State, he talks about this as a biblical model, right? But the point is you need to accept this. But the covenant that they struck was not that. The nation of Israel believed that these people were ambassadors from wherever it is, North Africa, wherever they claimed to have been. And therefore they gave them the peace and allowance to live, and they weren't asking for taxes, they weren't asking for monotheism, because for all intents and purposes they would never see them again. Meaning that they're not constituents, they're not going to be living among them, so they didn't make those the terms of the agreement. That's what the Torah is saying. Don't make such an agreement with the local inhabitants. Their mistake was thinking, these are not local inhabitants, these are foreigners. Therefore they said, it's all right, we'll just make peace and we're going to have an alliance. We'll work together. It's the Abraham Accords across the crescent of the Middle East. No, that's not allowed if it's local inhabitants. And that was the mistake. That was the problem. So I asked you a question. So let's say you were in the leadership capacity in Israel at this point in time, and these folks came to you and they're looking decrepit, and their walking shoes are wearing through, and their gourds of water are dry. So what would you say? Like, what's in it for you? You're ascendant in power. Why would you? Why would you accept the terms that they're making for these people? Especially because there's no communication or verification process. It's not like you can call up and say, "Listen, I'd like to speak to the embassy in Ethiopia. Do you have any No? Did anybody recently make a trek across the Sinai Peninsula? You can't do that. So why would they do this? So the Abarbanel identifies this, and I think it's a really powerful observation, which is like it speaks to the incredible success of Israel, and this is a dangerous thing. Like, here you have a nation which has made it's been a short amount of time. We're only still, the beginning of the year. They just made their way into Israel, and now you're getting foreign nations coming and saying, we want in, right? That is incredible, because on the one hand, spiritually, like that means to say God is clearly on the map, right? God is making it onto the pagan map right now. That's amazing. On the other hand, also, militarily, we've been training our troops, right? And people are clearly recognizing that we're going to now have the QME, the qualitative military edge in the Middle East. And we're like, so they fall into this trap. In a certain sense, they fall into this trap too fast. It says they didn't ask the mouth of God, and that's perhaps because they thought they were doing what was right for God. They thought, this is it, we're doing what God wants. But sometimes you have to be a little more careful. You have to walk slowly when it comes to these things. They fell into this traps. Now, I do want to just take a little sidestep over here on the moral question, which is going to come up again and again and again, which is, let's say that even if Israel does give bids for peace, they do offer peace to everybody. And if the people disagree, then you wipe all of them out. How does the Torah ask you to wipe them all out? Like men, women, and children? Is that really moral? How do we swallow that as well? Now, this is an anachronistic question, right? This is a question of a 21st century person influenced by the 21st century, where a majority of human history was such, just to understand this. Well, we expect the Torah to be a higher moral calling, but understand, just for a moment, that the way the world worked was such. But nonetheless, still, let's try to see if we can untangle this a little bit in terms of the moral standards. If you say like Rashi, they weren't given peace, then it's even a harder question, because you just walk in and bulldoze them. If it's according to the Ramban, you gave them peace, but if they don't say peace, then you get rid of every single one of them. How does that work? So the one answer is history paskins. Right? Why did God tell us to get rid of every single Canaanite nation? Not other nations, by the way. Israel does not have the right to do this with any other nation. It's only these 7 nations, only one period in time. Right? So once we finish this cleanup, this is not going to be the way they deal with Phoenicians, not going to deal with Ethiopians. They're going to deal with all these other people. They're not going to wipe them out. So why did Hashem say this? The answer is Hashem says explicitly every single time. Because what's going to happen if you leave them? You're going to start enculturating. Your kids are going to go to the same barbecues. They're going to go to the same colleges. They're going to come back and say, hey, Mom, I found this nice guy. He lives in the local Canaanite city. We went for a barbecue and we did this whole ritual rite. That's what's going to happen. It's only a matter of time, folks. Right? And were they right? The answer is absolutely. We're going to get to Sefer Shoftim. In Sefer Shoftim, we're going to see the beginning of the book begins by saying, Israel didn't conquer this, didn't conquer this, didn't conquer this, didn't conquer this, didn't conquer this. And the next chapter is, and therefore they became enculturated and they became pagan. Right? Or at least dualists, right? So if you think about it, meaning, was the Torah right? The answer is absolutely. God had foresight. God knew what was going to happen. He understands human beings. He created them. So he said to them, I don't want you being enculturated, get rid of them. Either they leave, they renounce their paganism, or they're killed. You have to clean it out. We're not talking about their moral culpability, because in terms of their responsibility, it's what's called mala se'asam, which means that their measure had filled down, meaning their corruption over centuries had reached the point that they themselves deserved destruction. Before, and at the times of Abraham, it was not so. which means to say that even though Abraham was promised the land, he couldn't get the land because they were not yet guilty enough to warrant destruction. But this is now that it reached the peak as a nation, as these nations, and now is the time where this needs to be taken care of, and we didn't listen. The other point which I think is important to appreciate, and this is the Rav Hirsch I came across, which I think is really important to appreciate in the context that we're dealing. This is source 15. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says over here, when it says, Lo sachos einecha alehem, do not have mercy on them, the repeated admonitions not to have any mercy on the Canaanite population shows how much such a merciless procedure goes against the grain to the Jewish people and is against what they are meant to be, which is and is to remain the predilection to protect all living creatures. They are to regard this merciless procedure against the Canaanite population as the exception, expressly commanded by God to be done at his bidding because of the special circumstances. Meaning, why does the Torah say again and again and again, kill all of them, have no mercy? Because that's not how we're supposed to be. So the Torah is trying to tell you, this is the exception. This is the one time in history I'm going to ask you to act in such a way. So just in terms of trying to square this with sensitivities as well that we have over here. Now, last little pieces over here, and we'll just close because our time is coming to a close. That is as follows. The decision being made. How was this decision made? If you look in the Pesukim very carefully, it says that Yehoshua made peace, but he did not make an oath. Who made an oath? It says the Nesiim, the ministers made the oath, which means you could have a well-meaning leader, but unfortunately a degree of democracy allows other people to have their say, and their say can often be a bad thing. So they jump in too fast. It sounds like Yehoshua is more tepid about this. It sounds like Yehoshua says, okay, we won't kill you right now. Right, that's kind of his response, and they say, "No, we're going to make a covenant, and we'll make it." That was the Nesiim, which makes sense. Why later on, when the people are upset about this, when they find out the truth, they get angry with the Nesiim because the ministers are the ones who jumped into this too fast. Right, so that's just in terms of the decision-making process. They didn't ask God. It seems like as we were talking and learning a little bit last week about the idea of Hashem giving more and more space for human-making decision, that comes with bad decisions too. Right, meaning the more He gives us space to make decisions, He gives us the full license, and we make decisions somewhat arbitrarily as well. But now we can come to the last question, which is the question as follows: is what was Israel's responsibility to their commitment? It was made under false pretenses, right? It was made in a way that it wasn't really what they knew what they were buying, right? So, do they have a responsibility to this as well? So the Radak gives us two tracks of thinking. Track number one of thinking, says the Radak, is they do have a moral responsibility, not a moral, but a spiritual responsibility, because it's what's called a neder al das rabbin. When I make an oath privately, then there's room for me to go and say, I didn't know all the terms, I didn't fully understand the circumstances, and I can go search for a heter of that neder. But when what's called a neder al das rabbin, when you make it in a public setting and it governs, it's not just an individual's being talked to, it's a society. You don't have the same license. You're not allowed to go back on that as well, which means to say they were trapped because the Nesiim gave such verification. That's what the Radak says. However, the Radak then goes on to say that maybe that's not true. Maybe even on such, it was completely under false pretenses. Maybe, in fact, they had no reason to follow this. He says, why? So why didn't they kill them? He says, you know why? You know why they didn't kill them? Not because they were held by it legally, because of the perception of the way it would be seen by the world around them. That's a very, very powerful observation to make, because it speaks to an incredible truth, a very painful truth, which is the double standard that the nation of Israel lives with, which is that we may not even be bound to be the one distributing the humanitarian aid. We're allowing it all in, but we're still going to be held to the standard of distributing it, even though it's not a legal responsibility under international law. That's the way the world seems to work as well. How many double standards when it comes to the nation of Israel? I just put a few over here, right? So in our civilian casualty rate is about 1 to 1.2, which means for every terrorist killed, there's 1.2 civilians killed. That's crazy. There's no other asymmetric war in the history of humankind which has got such good civilian ratio. It's not good to kill civilians, but in the end of the day, right, you're killing tens of civilians per terrorist in asymmetric warfare, right? But nonetheless, we are held to that standard. But what stands out to me most is if you remember the Oslo Accords, right? And so here we have this moment of the First Intifada, And Yasser Arafat's mamish, a murderer, mass murderer, terrorist, who suddenly now walks in his army uniform to make peace. And just preposterous. When I tell our children this, they'll be like, "Why? How did this even hold water?" And we're moving towards peace, right? So we're moving towards creating 3 areas, area A, B, C. We're moving towards where Israel is going to remove its military control, create space for a new organization called the Palestinian Authority, meaning just you put the PLO in the mikveh, right? And then out they come, and they're absolutely law-abiding citizens. And they're going to police, they're going to make sure there's no terrorists, and it's going to be a runway towards state and coexistence, right? And it falls apart, unfortunately, very soon. It leads to the second intifada, to many, many, many lives which are lost. But when it comes down to the blame as to why that happened, unfortunately, I was looking online. It's very upsetting to see how completely misinformed most people are about this. But I do want to read to you this speech that Yasser Arafat gave in Johannesburg, of all places, in a mosque in Johannesburg. I actually passed it by 2 weeks ago. This mosque, it's got a significant amount of minarets these days. It wasn't like that when I was growing up. But he says the following, and I'm going to quote. This is Yasser Arafat. This has to be understood by everybody. The permanent state of Israel? No, the permanent state of Palestine. Yes, it is the permanent state of Palestine. I have to speak frankly. I cannot do it on my own without the support of the Islamic nation. You have to come out and to fight with me to start the jihad to liberate Jerusalem, your first shrine. What are they saying about is that Jerusalem is their capital? No, it is our capital. It is our capital. It's the first shrine of Islam and the Muslims. Then he said, referring to the Oslo Accords, he says, this agreement, I'm not considering more than the agreement which was signed between the Prophet Muhammad and Kaiarish. Just understand how this worked. When Muhammad, he was kicked out of Mecca, right? So he went to Medina. He became an official there. He took power, eliminated his enemies, and then he decided he wanted to go back and seek revenge on Mecca, right? Mecca was a pagan pilgrimage site. The Muslims just switched it to a Muslim pilgrimage site, right? So they decided to go down to Mecca to fight. The problem was the tribes of the north were going to be attacking him, so he couldn't attack to the south, to Mecca and the north. So Quraysh, when he was dealing with the tribes of the north, he made a peace settlement with them. What was the peace settlement? It was that he made the settlement long enough until he conquered Mecca to break the peace accord to kill the tribes of the north. That he says this explicitly. That's what the Oslo Accords are, and he acted in such a way, right? So, meaning to say, it led to an incredible amount of loss of civilian life. And every time Israel responded with checkpoints and walls and so on, we were blamed for the apartheid state. But that comes down to, it starts here. It starts with the give on him. We make an agreement with what we think we assume is innocent, on an innocent basis. It's found to be completely baseless. But at the same time, we as Jews, even though there may not be even the legal responsibility, we still keep holding ourselves up to the double standard that no one else is as well. It's all here. It all starts right here, where the seeds are sown, for knowing that somehow, painfully, we're always going to be held to a different standard, and therefore we actually hold ourselves to that higher standard, which is we're going to even respect a non-oath alliance, which is going to dominate the Middle East. But I'm going to conclude on a more positive note, is that because of this will open up all of Israel. Because Israel respects their word and respects human rights, and respects their alliances even made under false pretense, this will be the key to the conquest of Israel. We'll see Be'ezrat Hashem in the coming week. Thank you.